Chapter 17. I eased myself into the dumbwaiter's cart after night had truly fallen, gingerly testing the cables to ensure that it would support my weight while I worked the ropes from inside. Cautiously, I worked the pulley system so that the platform lowered. I counted the openings that slowly moved past as I worked my way down, finally pulling the lever that clamped the brake into place and peering out of the lighted crack in the panel. The floors had been counted correctly. A sliver of Korth's profile was barely visible, poring over a dusty tome laid out on his desk. I pressed my ear to the crack, listening to see if any servants were tidying up or if any of Korth's advisors were speaking. There was no noise. It seemed as though Korth was done for the evening. Korth thought he was done for the evening, that was. I knocked against the panel so softly that Korth either didn't hear or dismissed the noise as unimportant. I knocked again, a little louder. This time, Korth glanced up from his book, looking in the opposite direction at the door to his chamber. "Enter," he called. I grinned to myself. Korth waited almost a full minute before shaking his head and returning to his book. I knocked a third time, even louder, and added in a stage whisper, "Korth!" His eyebrows rose at the wall that concealed the dumbwaiter, a puzzled smile quirking his mouth. "You can't hide from me," I continued in a loud whisper. The wooden chair creaked as Korth got up and approached the panels in the wall. Just before he opened the doors, I flung them apart and popped my head out. "Surprise!" He jumped ever so slightly and smiled.
"Odette, what are you doing here?"
"I figured that since you already walked on grass, you're a wild man now. How adventurous are you feeling?" I clambered out of the dumbwaiter and onto the rug. Korth stuck his head into the opening, looking up at the pulleys that stretched up as high as he could see.
"What are you doing here?"
he repeated. "I'm coming to steal you away for an adventure," I told him. "We're going to that masquerade."
"We can't do that."
"Why not?" I crossed his richly furnished room to where the balcony doors were flung wide to tempt in a breeze. "It's a perfect night for it."
"We would be recognized. I would end up talking to my subjects about their problems instead of spending time with you."
I pulled out 2 masks I'd fashioned myself before coming down to see him. The benefit of a masquerade.
"What if someone came into our rooms and saw that we were missing?"
I pulled some of the pillows off Korth's enormous bed and shoved them under the downy quilt, patting them into the rough shape of a human. Such a shame that the crown prince isn't feeling well tonight and went to bed early.
"They might check on me."
"Will they?" After patting across several plush rugs, I turned the key in the door's lock. As the bolt slid over with a satisfyingly loud clack, I became acutely aware that I had just locked myself into a room with a man. The bed in the center of his chamber suddenly looked much larger, a tangible reminder that we were 2 very unmarried people, alone and locked in a bedroom together. Korth seemed to share my thoughts.
"We can't be together without a chaperone. It isn't appropriate."
I nodded in mock thoughtfulness. "So you're telling me that you'd rather comfortably lie in bed with the knowledge that you're intentionally allowing an unprotected woman, your future wife, to roam the unfamiliar streets of a foreign land without an escort? And I thought you had honor." Korth blinked.
"Well, when you put it that way."
"Any more excuses as to why you're avoiding spending time with your fiancé? I'm starting to think that you don't like me."
"I assure you that isn't the issue."
Korth's voice was so sincere that I felt a pang of guilt. "Oh? Do you like me too much, then?" I held one of the masks up to his face to see how it would appear, wishing my palms would stop sweating.
"Something like that. I don't know if I can trust myself to be alone with you."
With his eyes and forehead concealed behind the mask, His strong jaw and perfectly formed mouth were all I had left to look at. "Keep it together, Dahlia." "Well, I trust you," I cooed, coyly batting the mask against his chest. "We're alone right now, and you've been a perfect gentleman. I trust that you won't take advantage of me while we are very, very alone tonight." Color rushed into Korth's cheeks, and he clenched his fists as he drew a deep breath.
"There will be other people there too," he said in a rush. "If it's a masquerade."
"Yes. It's time to see if you actually can dance, or if the rumors are true."
"What rumors?"
I widened my eyes innocently. "Why, the rumors that you have 2 left feet."
"I'm a perfectly capable dancer,"
he said, somewhat affronted. "Then prove it. Come with me." I gripped the front of his doublet and tugged him toward the dumbwaiter.
"We're going in that? But it's for transporting laundry and supplies. Why don't we just take the stairs?"
"Because that would be no fun at all. If we're going to sneak out, we need to have the fear that we'll be caught. It's much more exciting this way." Korth poked his head in to examine the dumbwaiter's mechanics.
"Will it hold both of us?"
"Only if someone very muscular manages the pulleys," I said with a flirtatious grin. "Just how strong are you?" He stared at me and swallowed.
"Physically, I can manage it. But if you keep looking at me like that, I'm not sure."
"Maybe I don't want you to resist me." I barely whispered it, my fingers still clutched around the folds of Korth's doublet. Godfrey's absence had never been more welcome. The memory of our brief moment of solitude in the library's hidden alcove snuck in to interrupt my thoughts, and I found it impossible to pull away from Korth. Korth closed his eyes and pulled in a deep breath through his nose.
"Show me how this works."
My eyes fell to settle on Korth's lips pressed tightly together, and it felt like all the oxygen had been sucked out of the room. "Show you how what works?" His eyes shot open to find me studying his mouth.
"The dumbwaiter's pulley system. How am I supposed to make the platform lower?"
Pink tinged my cheeks. "Of course." As I turned to inspect the system, I heard Korth release a long stream of air. It was easy to teach Korth how to use the pulley system, but wedging ourselves into the dumbwaiter put us so close that our legs pressed together. The difficulty was keeping my eyes off Korth's arms as he slowly eased us down to the lower levels. Each muscle in his chest, shoulders, and arms became significantly more prominent, and the veins on his forearms stood out. How I longed to run my fingers along them. When the dumbwaiter finally thudded down on the bottommost level, neither Korth nor I made any motion to exit immediately. Slowly, he released the rope and pulled the brake lever, clenching his fingers around it long after the clamps locked into place. "You don't need to use the lever when we're at the bottom," I told him softly.
"I just need to hold on to something for a minute,"
he responded, still clenching the brake lever as if his life depended on it. His eyes smoldered in the dim light of the dumbwaiter's empty shaft. The air in the small, enclosed dumbwaiter cart warmed with unnatural speed, and the humidity reached such an intensity that sweat pooled in my palms, as if determined to match the forbidden steam ensnaring my thoughts.
"Do those doors open from the inside?"
Korth asked, not even bothering to glance at the worn panel to my right. "Probably." I didn't make any move to show him how the panel worked. A masquerade didn't seem as attractive an option as being locked in this tiny, overheated dumbwaiter with Korth. The sharp image from my dream of Korth bending down to press his lips against mine roared back to life and nearly propelled me into acting on the impulse of discovering what such an action would feel like in reality.
"You're sweating,"
he said, reaching his thumb over to wipe my forehead free of the droplets collecting. Once the pad of his thumb reached my hairline, he paused and fiddled with the strands of my blonde hair, coiling it around his finger before releasing it. Every breath increased the heat and humidity of our close quarters, but leaving would be impossible. My body felt rooted to the spot, soaking in the sensation of Korth so close to me. He smelled like sandalwood and leather, which screamed masculinity and intoxicated me with the aroma. Shoals. I was going to get myself into major trouble if I allowed the thoughts in my head to run amok much longer. I was supposed to get Korth to fall in love with me, so it was only natural to feel attraction on my end, too. A lot of attraction, given how incredible Korth was. I wouldn't be a woman if I didn't see how handsome and honorable he was. This was a man who would be willing to sacrifice for his partner rather than selfishly demand more and more while giving nothing in return. The dimple to the side of his mouth drew my eyes. Part of getting someone to fall in love with me was physical affection. I should be applauded for going to such efforts. But how long would I continue to delude myself that the mission was my sole reason for wanting Korth to show more affection? I was supposed to make Korth fall in love with me. I wasn't supposed to fall in love with him. After several long beats, Korth leaned over to push the paneled doors ajar, opening our isolated box to the cool breeze rushing in from the kitchen's lowest level. The air's chill nip whisked away the inappropriate thoughts as my true purpose slunk back into my mind.
Ladies first,
Korth said with a strained smile, gesturing at the empty corridor. Chapter 18. I had expected more pushback over my plan of escaping the castle, but once we left the dumbwaiter, Korth was surprisingly willing to go along with my rebellious little scheme. As we passed the laundry room, which looked empty now that night had fallen in earnest, I saw servants' clothing hung out to dry and insisted on a detour. Korth donned a servant's black clothing and tied the mask around his face without complaint. In the next room, I changed into the handmaiden clothing, which felt far more familiar than the regal gowns I had been wearing. Then I took a moment to splash water onto my face. Keep it together, Dahlia. I merely needed Korth to trust me enough to lend his military support until the rebellion was won. Once I was inevitably discovered, I would sever all ties and leave. My heart gave an involuntary pang as I pictured Korth's face when he realized the betrayal that was unavoidable. We used the small passageway where deliveries were made to exit the castle. Once we were outside in the fresh air, it became easier to push away my apprehensions about the future and focus on the task at hand, to get Korth to enjoy himself and feel comfortable around me. You know, if we're going in disguise, we'll need fake names to call each other, I told him. Is there a name you want me to use? His brow, only barely visible behind his mask, furrowed slightly.
I've never thought about it.
Well then, you can be Heath, and I'll be Dahlia. The name slipped out of my mouth before I could think of a better alternative.
Dahlia,
he repeated experimentally, testing the way it felt on his tongue. Shoals. The way he said my name was far more seductive than any love potion could ever be.
That's a beautiful name.
I felt just as hypnotized as I had been in my dream. It would be torture once he reverted to calling me Odette again. It felt liberating to walk around in the town square, masked and in disguise. No one spared us a second glance, no crowds parted or stared as we strolled along, and there was none of the bowing and scraping that normally accompanied Korth everywhere he went. Colored lanterns hung on strings stretched between rooftops, and the town square was ringed in glowing braziers. Cooking pits roasted 3 sheep and a bullock that hissed and sputtered as fats and juices fell onto the bed of red-hot coals. Long trestle tables were laden with crusty pies, braided loaves of bread, and sliced fruits. Friends sat shoulder to shoulder, laughing and raising tankards to invite others to join their merriment.
Tess would like it here,
Korth said, watching as acrobats tumbled across the square, flipping over each other while others cartwheeled in circles. You really love her, don't you? He grinned an embarrassed sort of smile.
Who couldn't love her?
Barkers called customers toward their booths, advertising flower wreaths, jewelry, different foods and beverages, and a variety of other goods. A crowd of young men were laughing and joking as they challenged each other to a knife-throwing competition. Pirates by the look of their clothing, but they didn't appear nearly as dangerous or as old as most of the pirates the rebellion had dealt with in the past. In fact, many looked my same age. I angled my head to the side. Were they the children of other pirates, perhaps?
It's a long story,
Korth told me, following my gaze and accurately guessing my thoughts. Which one is in charge? My eyes flicked from one young man to the next. Korth looked around.
I don't see him here. He's missing a hand. Captain Hook, they call him.
Is he that young, too?
From what I remember, he's a little older than they are, but not by much.
I pulled my attention away. I was here to make Korth fall in love with me, not wonder at the origins of some younger-than-average pirates. What do you want to do first? Are you hungry?
I already ate supper.
But have you had festival food? It's terrible for your health and tastes sinfully delicious. I winked at him through my mask. If I'm going to be a bad influence on you, I may as well do it properly.
I really shouldn't,
Korth began as I purchased a dessert that had more sugar than a week's worth of meals at the castle. Enough about what you should and shouldn't do. What do you want to do? Slowly, Korth took the bite I held out to him and closed his eyes.
Wow.
What was that you were saying about what you shouldn't do? I asked as I snuck a bite of my own.
I forgot.
After we finished the dessert, I pulled Korth into a speed painter's booth. Didn't you say you wanted a portrait in one of the recent letters before I arrived?
Yes, I did.
There was another couple already being painted, and I couldn't help but stare. The woman was stunningly beautiful, but what made her particularly noticeable were the nearly transparent wings sprouting from her back that gave off a continual mist of golden glitter. Her back was angled toward us, so her wings were clearly visible above her backless green dress. A pirate with black hair and a small golden hoop dangling from his ear had an arm that ended in a curved hook rather than a hand, which he had draped around the woman's bare shoulders.
That's the pirate I was telling you about,
Korth said softly. The girl. What is she?
That's Captain Hook's wife, Tinkerbell. And she's a pixie.
The painter, clearly in awe of the pair, was dabbing the finishing touches onto their portrait, speckling golden flecks around the border. The pixie stood on tiptoe to whisper something into Captain Hook's ear, who grinned and raised his eyebrows at her. She smiled mischievously and batted her eyelashes. As the painter pronounced them finished, Captain Hook leaned down to plant a kiss behind the pixie's ear. I couldn't help but be slightly jealous. Korth wasn't nearly as affectionate with me as the pirate was with his wife.
Would you like me to pose you?
The painter asked us as the couple walked away.
Or do you have something specific in mind? Just her, not me,
Korth said, hastily shying away from the stool where the models could sit. Come on, Heath. You can keep your mask on if you want to. I was fairly confident that I wouldn't be recognized, but stayed masked all the same and combed my fingers through my hair. Don't you want to remember tonight?
Yes, I do.
Korth barely murmured the words, blushing scarlet as he fumbled with his coin purse to pay the painter and stand next to me. The portrait turned out beautifully. The artist had accentuated our best features and downplayed the less flattering ones, and the result had Korth staring between the picture and me, his lips parted as he compared. We were told it would need time to dry in the artist's station, and to collect it before we went home.
It looks just like you,
Korth told me as we left the booth. That's what artists do, I teased, looping my arm around his elbow as he guided me through the press of people. And now you get to have a picture of us to keep forever. Korth smiled.
As we will be married soon, I would like to think I get to have you forever. I'm a lucky man.
My stomach dropped a little, and I pretended to be engrossed in watching a chef sear a cut of veal in order to avoid answering. Korth, smiling more than I'd ever seen him smile before, led me through the crowd, a protective hand on the small of my back as we wound our way toward the performers. With each new act, he clapped, enthusiastically exclaiming over his favorite parts and beaming at me. At the end of one particularly impressive tightrope walking act, Korth pulled out his purse and shook a few coins into his hand to toss to the performers. The jangling drew the attention of a furtive-looking man, and I saw the familiar hollow look in his eyes as his gaze flicked down to where Korth was pouring the extra coins back. I pulled on Korth's hand as he tossed a coin. "Let's leave."
They're about to start another.
"Please, Heath, now." After one look at my panicked face, Korth nodded and held his hand firmly at my back. "Are you armed?" I asked quietly, looking over my shoulder.
No, I thought a sword would be a little conspicuous.
"No dagger? Nothing?" He shook his head. "Then we need to move and find a guard." I threw another glance at the crowd we'd just left. "I think we're about to get robbed."
What did you see?
Korth asked, mimicking me and staring at the crowd.
No one is following us.
A smart thief won't attack his mark right away. He would wait until he can make his move without being detected.
Then shouldn't we stay with lots of other people?
It's too easy for him to lift your purse when we're always being jostled. Here, give it to me. As Korth handed the small leather bag over as we turned around a tent, I was suddenly struck by the realization that if I wanted to, it would have been all too easy to lure Korth into a trap. He was far too trusting. Once concealed from the crowd, I used him as a shield and wedged the coin purse down the front of my dress. Korth hastily stared up at the sky.
I'm not looking,
he announced to the stars.
I'm not looking.
Nervous as I was, I couldn't help letting out a laugh. I think we have greater concerns right now. He continued to stare fixedly at the heavens until I'd finished tucking everything out of sight and tapped his shoulder. It's safe to look again. With a sigh of relief, he looked back down at me.
Warn me next time, okay?
Next time we'll be married and I won't need to warn you. He ran a weary hand down his face.
You really love teasing me, don't you?
I do. We wound our way past the booths, but didn't see any guards. Normally, we were surrounded by guards and chaperones, but then the moment we needed them, there weren't any to be found.
I don't think we were followed,
Korth said eventually, slowing down. Maybe not. I may have just been paranoid. I wouldn't be very useful in a fight. Korth stopped.
You don't need to be. I'm here.
The sounds from the festival still floated around us, and the smells from the roasted foods were so heavy on the air that they were nearly tangible. But I couldn't see a single other person.
And there's no one else around.
Why, Heath, are you trying to get me all alone? Godfrey would be horrified. Korth smiled.
He would be, wouldn't he? But wasn't it you who told me that being forbidden is what makes it all the more thrilling?
Something like that. I allowed my hands to drift up to Korth's shoulders as his fingers crept around my waist. Just as Korth inclined his head toward mine, the shadows behind him moved. With a yelp, I pulled back, my fist suddenly clenched around Korth's shirt. He stumbled forward, just in time to evade a knife that whipped through the air. Another shout, and a second shadowed person leapt out of the shadows, blocking the robber's dagger with one of their own.
Guards!
Korth bellowed. The masked robber and the second man clashed together for a few seconds, their blades exchanging swipes while Korth blocked me from view, arms stretched wide as he shouted again. Our first attacker fled. The second man ran a few paces after him, then turned. The colored lanterns hanging on strings overhead cast cerulean patches over the ground, and as our savior pivoted to face us, I recognized him even though he was masked. Curdy. He slowly touched his lips and earlobe, but before he got any farther, there was a clatter of guards running our way, and he bolted. "Come on," I urged Korth, tucking him away from the sound of the approaching guards.
"Shouldn't we stay?"
he asked, but I shook my head. "Do you want to explain to them why the crown prince is sneaking around with an unmarried woman in the dead of night?"
"Oh."
Korth picked up his pace.
"You certainly know how to twist words, don't you? First, I'm protecting my fiancé in an unfamiliar city, and now I'm sneaking around with an unmarried woman?"
I snickered as we ran. "Welcome to the world of women. Anything you say can and will be used against you at a later date."
"That seems like a raw deal."
"Ah, but you get a beautiful woman in return. Surely my affections make up for any frustrations." We slowed down, trying to catch our breath. Deliriously and inexplicably happy after our near robbery, each time we looked at each other, giddy laughter bubbled up. The late night and high adrenaline had erased our good sense.
"It's not funny,"
Korth gasped, still grinning from ear to ear. "No, this is the most serious of all matters," I agreed, and we burst out laughing again.
"We could get into trouble."
"Lots," I agreed. "If Godfrey were here,
we could push him into the lake over there."
I muffled my laughter and took several deep breaths. "What lake? I don't see one."
"It's more of a pond, really, and it's in the gardens here. Want me to show you? There's a bridge."
"Then of course we need to go." Chapter 19. The sprawling garden was littered with benches where couples sat, heads inclined toward each other and unaware of their surroundings. Amused, I cast an eye over at Korth, who resolutely plowed down the graveled path, boots scrunching over loose pebbles.
"Sorry,"
he whispered, all humor gone as he delved into the heart of the gardens.
"I didn't realize it would be so crowded. I don't want you to think my intentions are anything less than honorable. I just thought, the bridge is here, and I wanted to show you."
"You need us to be alone to show me something new?" I squeezed his hand. "How romantic."
"I didn't mean it like that,"
Korth babbled. "So you aren't trying to be romantic? You aren't interested in wooing me?"
I didn't mean that either.
I'm teasing," I told him softly. "It's okay to flirt back, you know. We are going to be married soon. Some flirting is expected."
"It should be called flustering,"
he sighed.
"I never know how to respond."
I laughed quietly. "It's cute to see you flustered." He rolled his eyes.
"Is that why you do it so much?"
"It's much more entertaining than being engaged to someone who always acts perfect. I would feel inadequate in comparison if I knew you had no flaws."
"You? I can't believe that. The bridge is there."
Korth pointed up ahead, where the moon's silvery light shone down on an elegant bridge that rose over a duck pond. At the crest of the bridge, a small gazebo stood, with pillars supporting it so people could admire the view of the pond from above. We made our way to the top. Another couple was there, but with a hasty glance at us, they hurried off to find a more secluded corner of the gardens. Music from the festival floated to us on the breeze, and the ghostly shimmering full moon was reflected on the rippling water below. The silver light shone through the cross-like designs that ran around the gazebo's upper perimeter and cast shadows on the bridge at our feet. I leaned my head on Korth's shoulder. "It's beautiful."
"Odette."
Korth shook his head in amazement at me, his eyes growing sad.
"You're amazing."
The return to my false name struck my ears like a frying pan to the head. "It's Dahlia tonight, remember? Don't blow my cover now, Heath." "And how does my being amazing explain your sudden melancholy?" He took several moments before he answered.
"You're intelligent, beautiful, confident. If it weren't for an arranged marriage, you wouldn't be here. Even just now at the festival, you were the one who realized what was about to happen. And it wasn't even me who protected you. It sometimes feels like... It feels like you don't need me.
I held on to his lapels and tugged him forward, so he was forced into a leaning position. Then make me want you. He tucked a loose curl behind my ear, his fingers lingering in my hair for much longer than necessary. His eyes held the same intense look that I had imagined in my dream, and I couldn't resist the flush creeping up my neck and into my cheeks. Scenes from my nighttime musings exploded back into my mind in full color and with every sensation amplified to triple what I had felt before. Instead of pulling away, Korth skated his other hand across my back. I made a valiant effort to remember that this was the goal, to have him fall madly in love with me. But staring back into his deep brown eyes, I lost my resolve to think of him as any sort of project. I fingered the buckles that ran up his chest, lingering on the topmost one, which was undone, before raising to pull the mask off his face. My heart began fluttering, my chest and stomach alive with a butterfly sensation that only intensified the longer I held Korth at arm's length.
I'm glad it's you I'm engaged to.
Korth's voice had dropped so low and deep that I felt the vibrations tingling in my chest. I wanted him to kiss me so badly that my lips ached. Korth seemed to be thinking along the same lines. His eyes hungrily searched my face and fixed on my mouth. I felt rent in two. On one hand, I desperately wanted to forget my duties and give in to the intense emotions swirling around my heart, pulling me closer to Korth with every breath I took. But also, I knew that eventually the truth would come out. It would crush Korth to know he was in love with someone who had lied to him and manipulated him all along. As Korth drew nearer to me, I frantically tried to make up my mind. I nearly managed to pull away, but Korth gently loosened the knot securing my mask so it fell to the ground, his fingers hooking around the back of my head, and my willpower didn't extend as far as resisting.
Dahlia,
he whispered, drawing me in just as he had during my dream.
I love you.
The use of my name was my undoing. I love you too, Korth, I whispered, so close that the tips of our noses touched and we shared the air between our mouths. How I wished I could be the noble and honorable princess that he deserved. If only I could find a way that would aid the rebellion in righting the wrongs in Ibora without Korth's heart being caught in the middle. Until I was discovered and convicted, was it so bad to lose myself in a tiny moment of happiness?
May I?
Korth rasped. Please do. When Korth kissed me the first time, he proceeded cautiously, barely brushing his lips against mine as his hand grazed my waist. The brief sensation broke a dam in my chest I hadn't known was there, releasing a flood of emotions that had a mind of their own. I clutched at Korth's shirt, kissing him back far more intensely than he had done to me, breathing in his scent and wishing he would hold me so close that all air vanished from my lungs. He exhaled sharply through his nose, but began returning my kisses with equal fervor as his hands explored my back and burrowed through my hair. Kissing him suddenly seemed more important than breathing. There was nothing more important than staying locked in our embrace. For a few minutes, I was able to forget my loyalties and lose myself to Korth, ignoring every other demand, every other thought. So this was what it felt like to be loved and to love someone back. Korth pulled back first, his eyes filled with a wild happiness that was foreign to his face, but that suited him.
I'm so lucky to have you, Odette.
Shame slithered back in with the use of Odette's name, nudging guilt to eat away at my heart. I was already an imposter who had taken advantage of Korth's position in so many ways. Did I really have to knowingly break his heart as well? But what if... I searched for any glimmer of hope that would allow me to retain the ecstasy from a few moments before. What if the rebellion was never discovered? I would need to stay married to Korth forever. No, I would get to stay married to him. My guilty feelings intensified as I remembered why I had futilely tried to resist falling for Korth in the first place. It had been so easy to maintain my protective emotional shield with Princess Odette. But with Korth, why did he have to make things so difficult? I tried to imagine what would happen once he realized the extent of my deception. Him and his rule-loving self. He would hate me forever. The thought went through me like a knife. I couldn't bear the thought of Korth hating me. But was one person really worth sacrificing my entire country's future for? No matter what, both Korth and I would suffer because of my betrayal. But if I had never taken this mission in the first place, my people would forever suffer with neglectful, selfish rulers. Surely the good of the many outweighed any damage. As much as I wanted to be, I couldn't be selfish. I pulled my thoughts back to the moment at hand. Isn't it fun not having a chaperone? My fingers followed the seams on his sleeves all the way up to his shoulders.
I can certainly see why it's required for us to have one until we're married.
He grazed my lips again, the music from the festival still flowing around us.
This is a little too much fun.
I propose that for every bridge we stand on together, we have to kiss at the top. Korth cupped the back of my head and inclined his head toward me.
That sounds like an excellent tradition. Life can't get better than that.
As I parted my lips, a slight movement over his shoulder caught my eye. Someone or something had ducked out of sight behind a bush at the water's edge. Recalling our attacker from before, I shrank against Korth.
What?
Korth asked, turning to follow my gaze. I thought I saw. From the bushes, I spotted a crouched figure scurrying away, whose profile was all too familiar. It was just Kurdy again. I sighed in relief. He was probably just checking on me. It was nothing, just a couple trying to sneak off.
How scandalous.
So scandalous, I told him, leaning back against him and reveling in our lack of a chaperone. What rule breakers. Korth and I secured our masks back in place and leaned against the railing that ran around the gazebo's edge atop the bridge, gazing down at the pond below.
There's a tradition,
Korth began. I thought we just came up with one.
There's an old tradition that goes back more than 100 years about this bridge in particular,
Korth amended.
Couples often come here to exchange vows.
You mean they get married here?
No, they exchange vows. Look.
He indicated a table that had small strips of paper secured under a rock.
They write down what they promise to always give the other and drop them into the vase.
A large, open-mouthed vase was at the edge of the gazebo. What sort of promises?
That they will always care for the other, always be honest with each other, that sort of thing.
My abdomen clenched at the second suggestion. How long could I continue this façade without the guilt consuming me? Korth, unaware of my internal struggle, had uncorked the ink bottle and scribbled down a vow. With trembling fingers, I did the same.
Odette, I vow to always be honest with you. I promise to love you unconditionally and to always put you as my top priority. When we get married, I want you to never doubt me or my feelings for you.
He dropped his vow into the vase, beaming at me. My heart shriveled, and tears threatened to pool in my eyes. Korth deserved someone much better than I was. I cleared my throat several times and read my own vows. Korth, you are the first man I've ever truly trusted, and honestly believed that you wanted what was best for me. Even if your feelings for me do change someday, I promise to always love you, no matter what happens. I clutched the paper. How I wished I could also vow to be honest with Korth, but I couldn't. As great as my feelings for Korth were, I couldn't let down the thousands of people who were depending on me. It was only until we received word that the coup had been successful, I told myself. Then I would come clean with Korth. He deserved that. Even if he hated me forever afterward, he deserved the truth. The paper fluttered out of my fingers into the vase. Chapter 20. As we walked slowly back to the castle, after the hubbub had died down and we'd retrieved our portrait from the artist, I posed a question to Korth. Do you truly believe that people can love unconditionally?
Of course. Don't you?
I considered it. I think people want to believe that they can love unconditionally, but I don't know if they fully realize what that would require.
How so? You just simply choose to love them anyway, even with their flaws.
But what if the other person does something to hurt them? What if a couple vows to love each other unconditionally and the husband is unfaithful to his wife? Should she still love him even though he betrayed her trust? Korth's brows furrowed.
If he cheated, then he would have lied when he said that he would always love her. If you truly love someone, you would never do anything to hurt them.
But what if I did something to hurt you?
You wouldn't, though.
Korth grinned as if it was some big joke.
What? Are you planning to run off with someone else?
No, I'd never do that. But there are more ways to hurt someone than cheating on them. That was just an example.
Even if other people aren't true to their vows, we're different. Neither of us would do something like that. I would never do anything that would hurt you in any way.
I swallowed the lump rising in my throat. I don't want you to ever get hurt either, I whispered. If only it were as simple as choosing what was right. A brisk wind ruffled the feathers on my mask. I shivered, and Korth instantly whipped off his jacket and wrapped it around my shoulders. You'll be cold, I protested, but Korth shook his head.
Keep it. You need it more than I do.
I couldn't help but feel warmed, not only by the jacket, but by his chivalry as well. Ever since meeting Korth, I'd been waiting for him to show the same signs of selfishness and entitlement that I'd grown to expect from all royalty. Even with other men like Kurdy, there was always the expectation that they would watch out for themselves first and everyone else second. But Korth, he was different. He genuinely cared. Instead of feeling obligated to shower him with praise as a transactional exchange, I wanted to show my appreciation for his caring for me. When he had finished wrapping the jacket around my shoulders, he went to let go of me, but I caught his hands. Korth, I love you. I hope you know that. He smiled, a look of pure elation on his face.
I love you too.
As we snuck over the footbridge, Korth pulled me to a stop.
Don't forget our new tradition.
We might get spotted.
Isn't that part of the fun?
He asked, drawing me in. His kiss this time was brief. It left me wanting more, but also despising myself for taking advantage of Korth's guileless nature. Someone like him ought to be preserved, not exploited. The inner conflict boiled within me, churning and bubbling, so I was torn between confessing my sins and running away to protect Korth from a traitor like me. How dreadful to have my selfish desires align with the needs of my people at the expense of his trust. As we snuck back into the castle, retrieved our original clothing, and made our way down the hall toward the dumbwaiter, Korth beamed at me, so perfectly happy that I couldn't help but love him a little bit more with each of his smiles. Since my guilt kept nudging me, it was easier than before to keep my hands to myself this time as Korth pulled the dumbwaiter back up to my room. I pushed the doors open but didn't get out. I tapped my finger on the edge of the small portrait sitting on the dumbwaiter's floor. Bridges and dumbwaiters in the same night, plus a portrait and our first kiss. I can't imagine a better person to sneak out with, I told him, tracing my finger along his jawline.
Nor can I.
Korth leaned over to kiss me, but as his grip on the rope slackened, the dumbwaiter gave a heart-stopping lurch and we plummeted a few feet. The dumbwaiter's doors splintered and snapped off their hinges before Korth redoubled his hold on the rope with a gasp of surprise while I clapped my hand over my mouth to muffle my scream.
Sorry, I forgot to set the brake.
Do you think anyone heard? I asked in alarm, staring around at the broken splinters of wood scattered around the dumbwaiter's floor.
Probably. Better hurry.
With a slight grunt of effort, he pulled the dumbwaiter back to my room and snapped the brake into place. We looked at each other, then both began to laugh nervously, smothering the sound with our hands. Nothing like a near-death experience to end a romantic date, I told him. Thank you for tonight. I'm glad you decided to be an honorable escapee and escort me. I clambered out of the dumbwaiter, while Korth hastily swept all the cracked bits of wood from the cabinet back into the dumbwaiter to remove any evidence of wrongdoing from my room. I'll see you tomorrow.
I love you,
Korth quietly called out as he began lowering himself to his own room, the splintered remains of the dumbwaiter's door swinging sadly.
So much.
That night, when I crawled into bed, I realized I'd never given Korth his jacket back. I buried my nose into the sleeves, much too long for me, and breathed deeply, inhaling the masculine scent that always lingered around Korth. I kept the jacket wrapped around me as I pulled the blankets over myself. If I closed my eyes and focused on the smell, I was able to imagine that it was Korth lying next to me. Once we were married, it would be. I would like that, I decided. Korth had a way about him that always left me feeling safe and secure. It would be a wonderful change to sleep next to someone whom I knew I could trust implicitly. I dozed off to sleep, imagining a future in which Korth was always at my side and had never felt happier. Waking up the next morning brought none of the transcendent happiness I'd felt the night before. What had possessed me to toy with the affections of a man who was so honest and trusting? The murmurs of my maids had roused me.
Broken to bits! His Highness said he forgot to close the doors when he called for a late-night meal. Rubbish, if you ask me. That man never forgets a thing. Everyone knows he never eats at night, and the bell never rang to call someone to the dumbwaiter.
The memory of Korth's momentary distraction in setting the brake that caused the dumbwaiter doors to splinter burst back into my mind in full color. My chest seized with anxiety. Did they know?
Covering for Tess again, no doubt. She's been disappearing from time to time in the last week, and it would be just like him to take the blame. Godfrey said he was going to ask.
Did you see that rope burn on his hand? It wasn't there yesterday. Then he just happens to have it today when the dumbwaiter is broken?
One of the maids tisked, and there was the sharp snap of sheets being shaken out.
You don't think he was in there, do you?
Another gasped in an undertone.
There doesn't seem to be any other explanation. His guard said he didn't leave his room all night, and the dumbwaiter is large enough for him to fit into.
You don't suppose he came here to see?
Their voices became so hushed that I couldn't decipher their words anymore. As discreetly as possible, I tried to shove Korth's jacket toward my feet, under the blankets and out of sight. Had they noticed? I didn't want his reputation sullied. If the members of the rebellion knew about it, they would undoubtedly want to spread the rumors and urge the marriage date forward. Korth said he loved me, and I had no doubt that he would do the honorable thing and marry me if my reputation was called into question. But now that the prospect was at hand, I couldn't imagine subjecting Korth to such a life. Even if our marriage was inevitably annulled after my true identity was discovered, I couldn't do that to him. We both were already emotionally invested, whatever I had tried to convince myself of otherwise. Even though the ships hadn't been sent yet, perhaps the time to confess had finally come. I owed Korth the truth.